Welcome to the famous or forgotten podcast, The Making or Missing of Great Artists. Hey everyone, welcome to this special episode of the Famous or Forgotten podcast. Today we are going to unpack the episode of our interview with Barbara Wolanin, wealth of knowledge that came out of that episode, and really excited to kind of start to unpack this. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of feeling that, you know, as we explore this topic of making or missing an artist and exploring the Philadelphia abstract movement, you know, like all these different layers, like I feel like this is just like what we thought was going to be like a tight little neat little package is just getting deeper and deeper and weirder. What are you
It's so complicated.
Really
There's
is.
so many layers to it. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that was fascinating for me was this idea of like the Philadelphia Triangle, as if it's like the lost, you know, like the Bermuda Triangle, where like all artists and their work is lost. All right. Like we've heard from Barbara on Ronald Bechtel, Sam Feinstein, and what was it? Arthur B. Charles.
Yeah.
And you have these Arthur B. Charles, pioneer of abstraction. Sam Feinstein started Group 55. Ronald Bechtel, who started the Philadelphia Abstract Artist Group. All of them creating work that's as good or better as the New York School.
Right.
No one knows about, and in more museums than a lot of the people that were in the New York School, at least on the Ronald Bechtel side. No one knows who they are. It's wild.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When she mentioned the term, the Philadelphia Triangle, I like took a second because I was like, oh, there's even like a full term for it, you know, like it was really a thing.
I want to pause real quick because I feel like a rude host. We have a special guest with us tonight. Mary is with us. You're used to Alex and I, you know, with the interviews. We have Mary with us too, but Mary is on the team with us. So welcome, Mary.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. So back in, let's stick with the idea of the Philadelphia Triangle and just kind of like adding some flavor to this, you know, and this is, he didn't describe it that way, but I feel like Bill Valerio like kind of hinted at it too, where it was like, you know, the dynamic of Philadelphia versus New York. And even the other day I was listening while I was on a walk, I was listening to an audiobook and Jackson Pollock came up in that audiobook. And it's just like, wow, like this abstract guy from New York, like pops up once again. Like they could have mentioned a guy from Philly. Like what's wrong with the guy from Philly? Like why are we stuck on these New York guys so much?
Yeah, it's strange. And it's not for that there's no love for Philly. I think it's just, what we're finding is it's a different mindset. You have the New York School, which is more tied in with commerce. How that happened, I mean, New York is a more obviously financial city. I'm sure that had some type of influence on it. And it just kind of, I guess maybe when the artist got a taste of what their art could sell for, and knowing that if they designed the next piece of art to be, you know, in the same vein, that they could also sell it and make another whatever boatload of money was at that time or is now. And I thought it was really interesting when Barbara said that even for Jackson Pollock, when he was being filmed in the creation of one of his pieces, he was saying that it took away from the artistic kind of, I guess, performer. He became, that's right, that's what it was. He became a performer. And so, you know, in a sense, do the artists then become entertainers where, you know, they they have to perform or they have to make certain type of work. And what does that do to the way that they think in the value that's in their work, like the real value that's in their work?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I remember her saying that thing where it's like the commercial success can potentially like ruin an artist, just from like the pressure of it all, even and taking away that like artistic innocence, I guess, maybe. So it is interesting that these two cities that like aren't that far apart had very different scenes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like what happens to value now, right? I feel like we're in this era of authenticity, people wanting something that's grounded, less focused. I mean, I guess it depends on what circles it's in, but like potentially like less focused on like material things, but more focused on like real value. At least you would hope. And like, then are you buying or valuing a piece of artwork just for the brand name, as opposed to, I guess, what it means is it's basically artwork now essentially is an investment because you have a name behind it that people already are familiar with. And then what happens for new artists?
Yeah, there's like it's an odd time right now because I feel like with like the internet and social media, like a new artist can be discovered so easily. And then at the same time, it feels like there's this like hyper consumerism, and almost like I don't think it is an oversaturation, but sometimes it feels like an oversaturation of like art or like content, I guess, online, which I think there's a big difference there. But yeah, there's a real like juxtaposition right now. I feel like even with like galleries, like I've gone to some exhibits at some of the local galleries here in Toronto, and they did an Andy Warhol one, but it was almost like and it was interesting. But it's also like, and then there's the gift store with like so many products.
Right.
And so that dynamic between like appreciating a piece of art for what it is and then just wanting to buy a tote bag with it on it. Yeah.
I mean, it becomes more entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that was interesting, and it seemed like it was kind of like a quick blip in the episode, was basically about how, we've kind of distinguished that like Philadelphia, and some of this might have been Bill Valerio talking too, but, there was the kind of educational side of things was definitely in Philadelphia. It was Philadelphia is a very art school city. And then New York is where all the social and the sales pieces of it happen. But Barbara brought up about how it seemed like the world of art shifted after the war. So we're talking the early 50s, where eyes went from Paris to New York.
Yep.
And it kind of seemed like it went from, all right, everything sellable and creative is moving, across the ocean. And it's just kind of like, okay, you can't help but think about like, okay, where's the world at now? And where, you know what I mean? Did it shift again? Did it go from New York to the internet? If we consider that to be a physical place.
Interesting. Yeah, because like I guess online there's really no barriers or real boundaries set up other than how you choose to be seen, I guess, and who you associate with, right? It's your connections and who you associate with. So then maybe it's not geographical anymore.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So there's plenty of artists that seem like they're doing all right now. But I'm sure for every one that seems like they're doing all right, there's 10, 20, 100 that no one knows about, and they're going to continue not knowing about. So it's kind of it winds up being the same lines in the sand. Are you staying in Philly or going to New York? And today in social media, it's, are you posting or not?
Right. Are you marketing yourself?
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas like if you needed to market yourself, you needed to be in New York.
Exactly.
But now you need to be in the right channels essentially, or yeah. I mean, it does kind of come back down to, is it, this initial question that we started asking ourselves, like, is it the quality of the art? Is there a threshold for that? Is it just pure marketing that does it?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting thinking about the marketing aspect with that like preservation aspect. That was something that really stuck out to me that she was talking about, of like the issue of preservation and storage of this like physical art. And I think I hadn't fully grasped like how much of like a constant journey it is, and also how expensive it is for like paintings. And it kind of seems like almost this like vicious cycle of like, to be remembered as an artist, you have to have your art preserved, but to be preserving it, you have to be making all these choices like before it needs to be preserved almost, and have like the resources to preserve it. And it's interesting also thinking about that with like art now being so online, and it's like, well, you can just go buy another hard drive or something like that. Whereas like a physical painting, like you need a space to store that.
Yeah, that was a really great point, and thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, it's this essentially, if you think about like for anyone, right? If you're trying to be remembered, what is that? That's your legacy, right? Mm-hmm. What you leave behind. And a lot of people, it goes on through their family. Maybe, someone in their family did X, Y, and Z. There's stories about them that were remembered, but maybe outside of that family, they may not be remembered unless they did something that either a community got around or something was created that like keeps it going. So as an artist, if you want to be remembered, essentially you have to build that loop. I don't know like what that really is, but you have to build a vehicle for yourself that kind of can live on beyond you. Yeah.
And we have we have some interesting stuff coming up in future episodes too, once they get recorded, just based on some of the conversations. We know a future guest has a lot of this storage and preservation going on that, to quote her, I'm not going to give away who it is yet because we haven't recorded the official episode, but some of this work hasn't been seen by anyone but me and him. Like, imagine that pressure.
Yeah. As an artist now, you really need to, you need to, if you want to be remembered, you have to make decisions now as to how's that going to happen. You can't just necessarily just do your thing, whether it's painting or whatever type of art it is, and expect that someone's going to carry the torch for you if you haven't planned for it. Yeah.
All right. So one of the other things that came up, and it's a piece of the conversation that I know we're all interested, we've already mentioned it a couple times on this episode already, is the idea of marketing, and how does how one markets themselves play into your success as an artist. Barbara made a couple mentions as to, we refer to it as champions. Barbara made a couple mentions of some of the, maybe we'll call them rainmakers, whatever they are. So, how has your guys' opinions shifted on that role as, some of these power players that kind of dictate a little bit of where the sale component is going?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of it is access, who you have access to and who they have access to, essentially, right? Like, what are the next doors that need to be open? And we were talking about this offline for like the music industry, right? It was previously the record labels that held all of the access. And that's changed now. In the art world, seems largely to be the galleries that hold the access. They're essentially like they're somewhat of the brokers, the marketers, and you have to essentially climb this ladder, which in itself is strange because you create a relationship with a gallery. That gallery essentially on a contingency basis works for you to promote you, puts you in their gallery, then in the hopes of selling your work and making it valuable, they get, what is it, like 50%, right? But like they're doing all this upfront work. It's kind of like a relationship with a personal injury attorney. And if you win, meaning like your work is sold, then they get a piece of the profit. You become more, maybe valued or noticed or whatever it is, right? Especially if they position you in the right areas. But a young artist, or let's say a newer artist, is going to start with a gallery if they get accepted. That's less well known. And there's this like outgrowing that happens where they essentially outgrow the gallery and they need to jump over to another gallery. Whereas they're not on the same side of the fence. Right? Because like what got you here can't take you there or won't get you there type of mentality happens, it seems, with the artist. And then they jump ship. They get approached by different galleries. And what's the other gallery that helped get you there left with? It doesn't seem like it's working now, but it doesn't seem like a good system.
Right.
What do you both think?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm interested to see where it goes because it might be just, visibility is there for artists now because of digital media and all of that. So I think what shortly follows that is the democratization of the sale of the individual pieces. Mm-hmm. So it's like I feel like, Alex, you and I know this just professionally, but like e-commerce 10 years ago was nearly impossible for just anyone off the street to just launch an online store. Now, I've launched 4 this afternoon. Mm-hmm. I'm kidding, but I could have find out something. So
that's right. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think with like the internet definitely gives artists like a more diverse set of streams that they can like sell their art. But I guess it like if you're like really like in the art world, that's not necessarily going to have the same credibility as maybe going the gallery route. I don't really know that those inner workings, but like I wonder if someone is an artist and like gets big doing like commissions and has their own like online store, are they seen as like credible as an artist to like galleries, museums, etc.? Because they obviously have the value, like the market value, like people are wanting to buy the art, but it's almost like, is that struggle of getting up through the galleries seen as like, a way of passage almost. I wonder.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's like, where does that validation of the galleries open you up to another market that needs that validation in order to consider you, like whether it's getting into a museum, right? Like, would a museum look and say like, wow, they have 1 million followers on Instagram or on, they're blowing up on TikTok. We should have this art here, and people are buying it. I don't know. I would tend to think they don't. So that's interesting.
The popular vote and like the critic vote don't always align. Because I think Barbara mentioned that, like, even if you have, like, having art in a museum, even if it's not being exhibited, but just like being stored in the museum, like, gives you academic credibility, like, as an artist. So yeah, I wonder, without that, even if you're having great commercial success, are you like invited into the art world in the same way?
That's interesting. Yeah, there was a mention, Bill Valerio mentioned this. Was it Bill? Yeah, it was. Maybe it was a different podcast. But that there's this historical significance aspect that museums look for. It's, was this historically significant to some type of era, some type of region or whatever? Like for the Woodmere Museum in Philadelphia, there's a historical significance there to Philadelphia. And so that becomes a major reason why they choose certain art. So, and I think it was a podcast that the director of MoMA said that they really look for historical significance, and they validate the historical significance of a piece of work by including them in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Maybe it is just a rite of passage, and you're still you have essentially the gatekeepers, or
maybe another way of thinking of it is, you just mentioned the MoMA in New York being kind of the rite of passage. Like, is there maybe a digital equivalent to that? I got a shout out from this account. Oh, I got this mention here. Like, is that kind of the new rite of passage? And I'm only throwing it as a theory, just kind of as you're saying it. I'm like, maybe.
It's interesting. It's almost like art influencers,
right?
Like MoMA is an art influencer for the investors.
Absolutely, yeah,
right. And certain galleries are as well.
Yep.
Sure. That's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely all interesting stuff. Like we keep saying, this is like an onion with endless layers.
Yeah, and we're looking at it from 10,000 feet up. If you're an artist going through this, how one, are you considering this? One, how will you be remembered? Like, what's the actual vehicle for you to get there? And then what are the decisions that you need to make along that journey? Do you have to go and work the circuit for the galleries, or can you just go and do your thing on social media? But then if you do you need to have a strategic approach to that, into who you're really trying to attract there? Or is it just self-healing? Essentially, you're just painting for yourself, and that just is what it is. And when you're done with it, that art will be done too, and will not be remembered.
I think that's like a dilemma every creative person is going through at this time with the internet and stuff. There's actually this discussion is reminding me of a trend that happened not so long ago, like a short form video trend. I forget the song it was to, but it was like, I just wanted to be an artist, and now I'm a photographer. a videographer, a video editor, like all of the different like marketing jobs. It's like, oh, I just became all of these things just to be an artist promoting myself on social media.
I think that has a lot of association with starting a business, right? Like you always hear like when you're starting a business, you wear so many hats. It's like, okay, you could have been good at one thing and then you start a business and then you need to get good at sales, finance, strategy, marketing, operations, finding people. Like you're a recruiter now, like there's all these things involved if you're trying to build it up. And the same thing is, yes, it's the artists who make it today outside of just being a great artist have to have that kind of entrepreneurial drive or the charisma to attract the people that will do that for them and won't screw them over.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. There was something that was kind of stuck with me for, it's just this juxtaposition for Sam Feinstein. You have someone that was a purist. We've heard that from multiple people. He was a purist, didn't want anything to do with the commercial side of things. But through his artwork, he was conveying this message, essentially, and he had all these things to teach. And he was a teacher and wanted to pass on the things that he essentially, acquired along his journey, like pass on those discoveries, those findings, the eureka moments, all of it. And he did that through teaching, but it was so limited because he had this other side of him that was pushing against the commercial side, which could have really maybe been the right track to get his message to many people that would be, that could be affected by it. And that's a real dilemma.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a dilemma that lives in a lot of artists, because just an expression, like art is just, the physical manifestation of what you have in your soul. And it's like, it almost might kind of feel like, hold on, this is just something that was in me. Like, what right do I have to sell this? That kind of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But there's plenty of people that also, why wouldn't I sell it?
Yeah. Especially if it resonates with someone else. And it's, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I found that discussion really interesting at like how conflicted he was. That his like need to have it not be commercial almost undermined. It did kind of undermine the ability for him to like share his art and have people connect with it and even like preserve it in a way. And I think there's such a tension there. And then it's also interesting with the artists like Bechtel, who is like, I want my paintings to survive. I want them to be shared, but also didn't lean commercial. He also pulled back, but at a different degree. And so I think it's interesting how like personal each artistic philosophy is and how they grapple with the commercial aspect. And it's like, because it's something that I think, like Sean said, like every artist struggles with, of like, this is just a piece of me that I want to share, but I'm in this like commercial world, and that's how we value things. And So it's interesting how people can like be doing, like they were both doing abstract art. They were in the same city. They were both like part of the same artist group, and they came to these different conclusions.
Yeah. Both being purists.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, it might be a good time to talk about like the differences between them to try to unpack that. Right. You have Sam Feinstein was, I think, 10 years older than Bechtel, and was already writing for Art Digest in New York. Started Group 55. Bechtel joins, becomes president of the group, and then they have this kind of head-to-head where Bechtel, who in his life is a engineer and is methodical, and even Barbara said in the way he approaches his paintings, they start with a sketch. There's a limited color palette. It's planned out, and you have Feinstein, who he thought that a lot of his works were never finished. He wanted to keep them and continue working on them. And so on one side, Bechtel is structured, right? And Feinstein is not. But then in the group, Feinstein wants it to be all about education and to have structure to the group, structure to the meetings. People were required to attend mandatory meetings, whereas Bechtel kind of pushed against that and was like, we just want to share our art, talk about the art, and then saw Feinstein as more dogmatic, and they created this rift in the group, and Bechtel pulls 2/3 of Group 55 to start the Philadelphia Abstract Artist Group and continues with that group much longer than Group 55. Potentially, I don't want to say, more successful, but essentially lived on longer with more people involved in this type of flexible nature. We're just going to meet. We're going to show our art to each other. We're going to learn and talk about it. And Feinstein went on to want to teach. And so if he was so serious about wanting to teach, wanting to have structure, meaning that he wanted to educate people and kind of bring his value towards people, why not do that with your art as well? Like, let it live on, right? Your education is meant to like better the lives of others, them take it the next step and live on. Why not do that with your art? And it's this, I just don't get it.
Yeah. And to continue what you're saying, even now, like as we're looking at this all in 2024, all of that work and everything started between the 50s, 60s, 70s. We're talking 40, 50, 60 plus years ago.
70 years ago almost, yeah. Group 55 started in 55. It's almost 70 years ago.
Yeah. We're talking about that long ago, and we're looking at now where, the people who have essentially inherited this work, the difference in how this was all organized, yes, Bechtel left it to Reed, but everything's at least organized, and some of it's named, and
and at least it all has dates.
Yeah, it's all at least in some form of order.
Mm-hmm. He thought more about it seems.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some order to it. The materials that he used were meant to survive. Right, he used high quality paints, watercolors, high quality paper, and with Feinstein, it's like, I guess maybe he was more of a pure artist. He was just like, I have this idea, I'm going to paint. I don't really care about its survival.
Yeah. Again, I'm hinting at an episode that's upcoming, but we know that, I hinted at it already earlier, that two people have seen some of this work. There's so much of it that's just totally unnamed, not dated, nothing. in a pile.
And it's in storage. Yeah, and it's 99% of it is in storage that no one has ever seen.
Yep.
And that storage is expensive. And what happens when there's no one to carry the torch?
Yeah, when I was listening to Barbara talk about that, I just had the thought, I was like, wow, we're lucky Bechtel even signed and dated his paintings. Like, thank God. But I thought it was interesting when she was talking about her work with Feinstein's work of like, how do you create like a story and relevance around these paintings that are like untitled, have no description, and have no context. And they're also abstract art, which is at least like in realism, you can maybe be like, oh, that looks like this year or this place, or you could grasp some details from it. But it's abstract. It's kind of like, well, this could have been made at any day, anytime. Who knows?
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is when we asked her about as a curator and she's setting up these shows, what's the goal of the show? And the goal of the show, from what she said, is really to tell a story. Mm-hmm. When you go into a museum, every piece of artwork has, a title card, whatever, a place card next to it, right? To describe that work. How do you create a story if you don't have any of that information? Right. So it makes the job of the curator, the museum, the gallery a lot harder if you don't have any of that information. And even, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll wait till the next debrief. But it's like, even if someone was inspired by a piece of artwork as someone close to the artist, right? And they went off and they wrote something about it or touched them in a certain way, that could be helpful, right? But that needs to be recorded and associated with that artwork. There needs to be some organization in place.
Sure. All right. So it's feeling like we're beginning to round this episode out. A lot of good insights. It definitely, I highly recommend anyone who's interested in art, definitely Google Barbara Wolanin. A lot of we barely scratched the surface. Like we took a peek inside her brain at like one aspect of one thing that she knows. It's like the extent of knowledge that this woman has is just absolutely incredible. So her credentials speak for themselves, like 10 times over above where we were even begin to start looking.
100%. Yeah, and hopefully we'll have her on another episode to dive deeper into other topics as we explore them, to try to find out how artists make it or are remembered.
Absolutely. All right, so let's round this out. I'm putting you guys on the spot, as I often do. What do you think is, just looking at this purely as an educational experience, what was one thing, one lesson that you think you could extract from what we heard from Barbara? And if it helps, I can start, so I can give you guys 30 seconds to 30 seconds to think through it. I think the idea of placement, I think that was one thing that Barbara kept hinting at, whether it be the references of the Philadelphia Triangle, the use of champions. I think if I'm an artist and listening to this, I'm kind of hearing that and saying, okay, how can I put myself with these placement experts or whatever you want to call them?
Got it. You're essentially your champions, right? Who are your champions?
Who are my champions? That's the question.
Who are going to both in the next? Okay, I like that, and I'll form it in a question as well. if I'm an artist, having learned what we picked up from Barbara, I'm asking myself the question on one, do I want to create a legacy? Do I want my art to live on? Do I want my name to live on? Right. I guess that's the first question is, my art to live on, or do I want my name to live on, or both? And then if the answer to either or both is yes, then what's involved in that, right? Like getting an understanding of now I want to know, and it'd be great for us to unpack. If you do want to be remembered, these are the things that need to fall in place in order for you at least to have the vehicle for your work to be remembered. Have it like at least storage fees are paid, right? Or it's in the permanent collections of museums. Like there needs to be some type of planning. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
Mine was a similar vein to that, but kind of like asking myself, okay, yeah, if you want that legacy, if you want your art to be preserved, what are you doing today so that 50, 80, 100 years from now, someone could discover you on a podcast like this? Like, how do you put those steps in place? And I mean, to bring together both of your points, and like, who is gonna look after that when you're gone? Yeah.
All right. This is a great time. We hope everyone found this helpful, and well, if these episodes make sense to keep doing, we'll keep doing them, because again, it's our effort to try to just unpack all the depth of knowledge that we're hearing. And thank you for tuning in to the Famous or Forgotten podcast. I'm Sean, joined by Alex and Mary. Thank you both for taking the time today to do this, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Famous or Forgotten podcast. We hope you found it insightful, educational, entertaining, and everything else that goes into a great podcast. We are always looking for folks to provide insights into this conversation around artists and what makes them succeed or not. If you feel like you have some insights to provide to this show, feel free to check the podcast notes below, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the show description. Our contact information is there. You can get in touch, and we'd love to start the conversation with you and allow you to provide any kind of insights that you think might be helpful. Stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next episode.